This story, although different, will challenge your thoughts and touch the deepest part of your soul, revealing the power hidden in sacred places and the dangers that lurk when human curiosity exceeds the limits of prudence. There is a fine line between what we are permitted to know and what wisdom prevents us from exploring, and our character today crossed that line in a place where faith and mystery walk side by side: an ancient convent. This experience not only marked him forever but revealed a universal truth about the need for divine intervention in our lives. As you delve into this narrative, I invite you to an act of faith and solidarity. If you know someone in need of prayer, someone going through difficulties, a relative, a friend, a neighbor, write their name in the comments right now. We will add each name to our main prayer with a rosary, trusting that the union of our supplications will reach the heavens. The tourist in question, let's call him Miguel, was a modern man, full of curiosity and a certain skepticism, accustomed to deciphering the world through logic and science. He had traveled to a remote region, famous for its natural beauty and, surprisingly, for being home to one of the oldest convents in that part of the world. Drawn by the imposing architecture and the stories that whispered of the peace and silence within its centuries-old walls, Miguel obtained permission to stay for a few nights in one of the renovated visitor wings. The days at the convent were filled with tranquility, gentle prayers, and the simplicity of monastic life, which should have been a refuge for his ever-agitated mind. But Miguel's adventurous soul felt drawn to something more. Something that transcended the apparent peace, an air of mystery that seemed to emanate from a specific spot in the complex, a place everyone seemed to avoid. Miguel's curiosity was like a flame that, once lit, was difficult to extinguish. During his wanderings through the convent's labyrinthine corridors, he noticed an old, imposing door at the end of a seldom-used hallway, covered in dust and seemingly untouched for decades. There was no sign, no visible handle, just a small crack at the bottom, as if the air inside refused to mingle with the outside. The nuns, always cordial, had gently warned guests that this particular hallway and door were restricted, part of the oldest enclosure, and should not be accessed by anyone, vaguely mentioning the presence of the past. This warning, rather than stopping Miguel, only further fueled his restlessness and his desire to unravel what lay behind that enigmatic portal. His rational mind simply could not accept a no, without a logical and irrefutable explanation to justify such a prohibition. One night, driven by a mixture of boldness and recklessness, while the convent was profoundly silent, Miguel decided to ignore the warnings. Armed with a small flashlight and his cell phone, he crept into the forbidden corridor. The air there was noticeably heavier, denser, unlike any other part of the convent. A subtle chill seemed to pierce the tranquility of the place. With some effort and using a makeshift tool, he managed to open the rusty latch of the sealed door. The sharp creak echoed in the silence of the night, making his heart race, but adrenaline drove him on. As he opened the door fully, a wave of stagnant, cold air enveloped him, with an indescribable smell, something ancient, like mildew mixed with an odor reminiscent of centuries of seclusion, and even something slightly metallic. The room, or what appeared to be a chamber, was small and cluttered, filled with shadows that Miguel's flashlight barely dispelled. Old furniture covered in dirty cloths was piled chaotically, and the air was oppressively heavy, almost difficult to breathe. Suddenly, a feeling of indescribable dread washed over him. It wasn't the usual fear of a dark environment, but a profound anguish, a malaise that seemed to drain all the energy from his body, making his steps falter. An inexplicable coldness began to invade his bones, and shadows seemed to take on indistinct shapes, moving at the edges of his vision, though nothing concrete could be identified. Miguel felt as if the very history of the place, perhaps filled with pain or ancient spiritual conflicts, was being unraveled under his skin. As the presence intensified, Miguel's flashlight began to flicker erratically, and his cell phone simply went dark, leaving him in complete darkness, immersed in a cold that came from within, a cold that froze his soul. Panic rose in his throat, a terror so primal that his legs buckled and he fell to his knees on the dusty floor. There, alone in the oppressive darkness of that forgotten room, a sharp pain in his chest forced him into an inevitable confrontation. His mind, always so logical, was invaded by an overwhelming feeling of despair and vulnerability. The intellect he so prized could not help him there. The indistinct shapes in the shadows seemed to close in, and he felt a crushing pressure, as if something invisible, ancient, and evil were approaching, and his seconds there in that situation became an eternity. In his utter despair, in a moment of startling clarity, Miguel felt an irrational impulse, something he had never experienced in his rational and skeptical life. There was nothing left to cling to, not logic, not science, not even his own strength. A single name, almost whispered, burst from his trembling lips. "God, help me! Please, God!" It was a primitive, clumsy prayer, perhaps the most sincere he had ever uttered, coming from a place of utter helplessness and despair. And in that instant, the suffocating pressure began to ease, the darkness seemed to recede a little, and the paralyzing cold slowly dissipated, like a mist dissipating in the sun. The faint light of dawn began to filter through a high crack, bringing with it the song of a bird and the peace of a new day. He had been touched by grace in his darkest hour, receiving the light that guided him out of that room and out of that phase of his life. The experience of that night changed Miguel forever. He left the room frightened, yes, but also deeply impacted and with a new perception of life. His faith, previously non-existent, had been born in the cradle of despair and blossomed in the light of mercy. He realized that there was more to the universe than his eyes could see or his mind could comprehend, and that the power of faith and prayer is a real force, capable of rescuing us from the most terrifying situations. Miguel didn't tell his story to everyone, but he became a more humble, more compassionate person, and someone who found strength and meaning in the sacred. He learned that there are certain places and spiritual dimensions where reason falls silent, and the only thing that can save us is the light of faith and God's mercy. Often, like Miguel, we harbor our own forbidden rooms in our lives, metaphorical places where we accumulate fears, sadness, resentments, or addictions that have become dark and untouched. Have you ever stopped to think about which room, within your heart or mind, you've avoided opening, perhaps out of fear of what you might find there? Just as Michael faced the danger of an invisible reality, we too run the risk of being overwhelmed by what we avoid facing, whether it's an old, unforgiven hurt, a paralyzing insecurity, or the temptation that insists on knocking at our door. It's easy to get carried away by curiosity or self-sufficiency, believing we can handle everything alone, but the truth is, we need support that goes beyond our human capabilities. The Holy Spirit is always ready to help us sweep the dust from these hidden rooms, to bring light where there is only darkness, to cleanse and restore what seems irremediable, as long as, in humility and faith, we invite Him in. Not all spiritual battles take place in ancient mysterious convents. Most of them unfold in our daily lives, in our innermost thoughts, in work challenges, in family conflicts, and even in how we react to small frustrations. How often do we feel discouraged for no apparent reason, irritated by little things, or lose our temper with loved ones, and fail to realize that behind these feelings there may be a subtle influence trying to divert us from peace? The enemy works between the lines, sowing doubt, disunity, and hopelessness, often making us believe that spirituality is something distant or reserved for special moments. Michael's story reminds us that the forces at work in the spiritual world are real and that, at times, they manifest themselves in unexpected ways. Hence the importance of being ever vigilant, with constant prayer as our shield, the Word of God as our sword, and the Eucharist as our daily sustenance, strengthening our soul to resist every onslaught of evil, be it visible or invisible. Note how, for Miguel, the turning point was not his intelligence or his courage, but rather his complete and utter desperation, which led him to a genuine cry for God. Perhaps you, on your journey, have felt this sensation of being at rock bottom, where all your strategies have failed and there is nowhere left to run. It is precisely in these moments of profound vulnerability, when the masks fall and we shed our self-sufficiency, that the purest faith can be born or strengthened. It is when we truly hand over the reins of our lives to the Creator, admitting that we can no longer carry the weight alone, that His grace manifests powerfully, transforming what seemed like an end into a new beginning. Know that there is no shame in acknowledging our weakness. On the contrary, it is in our weakness that God's strength is perfected, and He is ready to lift you up, even from the darkest places, if you, like Miguel, cry out to Him with all your heart. After an experience as remarkable as Miguel's, or even after a divine touch in our own lives, it's natural to feel the need to share this new perspective, to become a beacon for those still in darkness. Perhaps you've already experienced the power of prayer, the comfort of God's presence, or the forgiveness that liberates, but still feel shy or fearful about sharing. Miguel's example, even if not public, shows us that internal change is the first and most powerful testimony. Think of the people around you, your family, friends, colleagues, who may be facing their own forbidden rooms and desperately need a light. Your life, your gestures of compassion, your words of encouragement, and your living faith can be the instrument God will use to touch other hearts, leading more people to this conversion and a transformative encounter with Him, spreading peace and hope so that no one ever feels alone in the face of life's adversities. Just as Miguel faced the shadows in that room, many of us in our daily lives are tested by situations that push us to our limits, moments where faith seems to be our only refuge. It is in these moments that prayer becomes not just a refuge, but a lifeline. Daily we are called to forgive, to seek peace in our hearts, to spread the good news through our words and actions, and to strengthen our faith with every step. And if what happened to Miguel teaches us anything, it is that daily and constant prayer is not just a ritual, but a vital conversation with the Creator, an inexhaustible source of strength, protection, and comfort, which leads us to conversions of soul and empowers us to face any darkness. Once again, remember the people you love who need a miracle. Write their names in the comments right now, and we will pray for them in our rosary, joining the forces of our community in a single cry. What is your opinion on Miguel's story and what happened in that convent? Have you ever had an experience that led you to deeply confront your faith? Leave a comment and share your reflections. If you were blessed by this story, please like it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next messages, and share it with anyone who needs to hear a word of hope and faith. May the peace of Christ be with you.